The Chicago Bulls season is coming to a close with only 6 games left remaining on the season, the first of which is tonight against the New York Knicks, which, of course, we'll preview that game. But we're also going to talk about why this Chicago Bulls front office and their fear of really making change to the team is ultimately going to be the undoing. We're going to talk about all that, plus more, right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that being said, let's go to get into this content for today. And so I want to talk about something, right? This is going to be probably one of the, you guys know, I try to be really fair, right? I'm typically a very optimistic person. When it comes to my favorite teams, I like to think that things are going to work out the way that they do on that the front office would hope that they're going to do on paper. And over the last 3 years, right? If you've been a subscriber of this channel or a listener of the podcast version, basically since I started the show almost 3 years ago, you would see that clearly my optimism has gone back and forth kind of over the last couple of years or so, right? And it comes down to this front office and really their inability to really kind of recognize the market, right? To kind of future forecast things with the market. Also, their inability to really make the tough decisions. And that's what it comes down to. And Billy Donovan was asked by Joe Cowley. He was asked about the Bulls and their upcoming decisions that had to be made when it comes to this team. And he said this, direct quote, "I have not had any discussions about that, but I think our guys have done a really good job with what's been thrown at them and what we've had to overcome. And I believe in my heart that there's enough in this locker room to find ways to get wins and results. The part of the expectations of competing, you're supposed to do that. It's all of our jobs, right? But I think we can get results. But the reality is there's $70 million that's not playing. That's just a reality." Now, the last part of that, I can take no. There are $70 million of players sitting on the sideline for the Chicago Bulls. And Lonzo Ball, Zach LaVine, Patrick Williams, all which at one point were supposed to be starters for the Chicago Bulls. Now, Lonzo, the Bulls get no more credit for Lonzo not being there. I'm sorry, Lonzo's not there. He hasn't played basketball for almost 3 years. If you could not in 3 years make a new plan, then that's on you. Now, Kobe White, I would assume, have stepped up hugely for the Chicago Bulls. And one of the things that we always knew coming into this season was that the Bulls had to have jumps or leaps from some of the young players to really increase the Bulls' ceiling. And Ayo and Kobe have done that. Alex Caruso has also made quite a step as a shooter for the Chicago Bulls this season, and still keeping that defensive intensity. And I've seen the people who have said in the comments things like, well, you know, if Zach LaVine never went down, if Zach LaVine this, if Patrick Williams didn't go down, the Bulls would be here. I made those comments, and they're still valid, right? When you look at it, if the Bulls did not have such a slow start, right? Not even to say that they still couldn't have got off to a slow start, but the slow start they did going 4-15, basically what that did was it put the Bulls in a situation to where, you know, had they had kind of even more of like a 40% win percentage to start the season, the Bulls would be competing right now for a 7th or 8th seed, maybe even a 6th seed, depending on how things went. So that's what it comes down to for the Chicago Bulls team. And so I get that matters as well. But when you pair that with the Javonte Green signing and the fact that Javonte came back, things like that, right? This team right now, this front office, is so focused on competing now that they, to me, have not done a good enough job at building for the future. Now, yes, Kobe and Ayo have made huge steps. I cannot deny that. And maybe if Zach LaVine did not go down and had a chance to work him back out of his slow start as well, we could be looking at the season completely differently. But the thing is that you still sit in a spot right now where you're looking to, because per Casey Johnson, and we'll talk about that here in the next segment, the Bulls are still looking to move Zach LaVine this offseason. That's another shortcoming from you. You missed out on an opportunity where the Knicks offered you R.J. Barrett and multiple first-round picks, and you did not take them, right? Because, and I understood it at that time, what Zach LaVine was going through, what he's been, how good he was for that season, last season after the All-Star break for the Chicago Bulls as well. But you just have to look at things, and that's where great front offices are separated from good front offices, is when it comes down to do they future forecast really good. This team is locked into mediocrity. And that's the scariest part about this, is that this front office has seen the ceiling of this team. And yeah, one could say, well, the ceiling's going to raise with Kobe and Io. Yeah, but what about the slide from Nikola Vucevic? DeMar DeRozan at some point is going to slide some. Again, I think his game is going to age really well. And now you're on the precipice of signing him on a long-term deal for what? Right? And, I get it, the assets maintaining and things like that. It's just right now, where this team is, the combination of ownership, the combination of the front office, the combination of coaching, right now where the Chicago Bulls are a place that most franchises try to avoid their best to be in. But the problem is that it seems like AK is embracing being in mediocrity. Most teams, when they sit in the middle for as long as the Bulls have been in the middle, we're talking now 3 years of the Bulls being mediocre. Most teams, when they do that, they make a decision to either take a step back, get more draft picks, things like that, right? Increase the value of your picks, right? Do that type of thing. Or they go all in and trading what assets they can for win-now moves. And the fact that it seems like AK is content, fully content, just staying here right in the middle and selling it to us, wrapping it up in a bow and selling it to us as competitiveness, it's really freaking disgusting, man. And I know, am I overreacting a little bit to that Billy Donovan comment on they haven't had those discussions yet? Yeah, probably. Like, don't make no mistake about it. I'm a little bit overreacting to it. Was I a little bit triggered? Absolutely, I was a little bit triggered by that. Because are they going to have those conversations right now in the middle of the season? No, right? Realistically, no. But, you can't keep going into I will not keep going into the offseason saying, oh, well, AK has this available, this, and this. You got to show us. And unfortunately, what we've seen realistically from this team is that they are 100% fine just being mediocre. And I don't mean as we're heading towards a playing tournament or anything to just kind of, shit on the front office, but it just is where it is. This front office is perfectly fine and okay being mediocre. And as long as that's the thing, and I get it, people blame ownership, people blame this, people blame that. Jerry Reinsdorf doesn't operate the day-to-day. And when it comes down to it, it's up to the GM of the Chicago Bulls to draft well, make smart decisions, because Jerry Reinsdorf isn't stepping in on those decisions. The only thing Jerry Reinsdorf is stepping in on is don't go into the luxury tax, and you shouldn't have to go into the luxury tax to get yourself out of mediocrity. That's a place in a spiral of why I can understand ownership wanting to. You don't want to use the luxury tax as a safety net to just make things work, right? That should be something that you're keeping something together, or you're making that one move that's truly going to put you over the top. And unfortunately, the Bulls, and that goes back to that $70 million that Billy Donovan talked about that's on the sideline, the Bulls got to figure that out. And we'll see if they can add some more clarity to that this offseason. But one of the things that are pending to maybe potentially add some clarity to that this offseason is the Zach LaVine scenario. And I talked about that a little bit earlier on. Casey Johnson still maintaining that the Bulls will try again to move Zach LaVine this offseason. Now, that's not to say that that's going to be successful, right? I'm not saying that that's the case at all, that the Bulls could very well try to move Zach LaVine and still find a deal that it ends up making more sense for Zach LaVine to stay on this team and for the Bulls to hope that he's going to play well enough to maybe, a team does decide to go back in, maybe by the trade deadline, or ultimately maybe he does decide to just stay. And like I've said before, we've seen players request trades before, end up staying on those teams, and it end up working out long-term, right? So that's what you got to do. But ultimately, it comes down to just a few things. The Bulls have been almost 5 points better per 100 possessions with Zach LaVine off the court. Now, some of that also plays into the fact that Zach LaVine was off to a slow start and never really truly worked himself fully out of that. He showed flashes of coming out of that. But this is where, again, and maybe this is me expecting the front office to be smart, and it also is going to take some luck. But make no mistake about it. The 76ers are there. The 76ers who have 3 players under contract for next season and are trying to make a move to convince Joel Embiid, well, in hopes. We don't know if he will for sure, but to try to build something around Joel Embiid to where they don't have to worry about him possibly requesting a trade or anything like that down the road. And I do think that the 76ers are a problem for most teams and their pending free agents. I would say this, if the Bulls want to keep DeMar DeRozan could very well use the 76ers as leverage, as could Paul George, as could other players. But here's the thing. If the 76ers do strike out, which is a possibility, we've seen teams clear cap space and nobody want to go. Now they have an MVP in Joel Embiid. They got Tyrese Maxey down there. They got players that players may want to come and play with, right? But if they do strike out in free agency, I would hope that the front office finds a way to leverage that to their advantage. While the 76ers were out on Zach LaVine this trade deadline, that's because they wanted to maintain their flexibility in this offseason. If they strike out, best believe the Bulls should be one of the first ones calling, and not to say that the 76ers will absorb all of Zach LaVine's contract outright, but then you work yourself into a situation where they don't have to match that salary exactly. And so that could be something as well. But again, that would take the front office to have vision. That would take them to get creative. That would take them to do a whole hell of a lot of things that we just haven't seen consistently from this front office to be able to do for us to get there. And so, we'll hope, right? We'll keep hope alive. But I think the Zach LaVine situation is going to kind of dictate a lot of how much this Bulls team gets out of mediocrity. Not just saying that Zach LaVine trading him automatically gets us out of that, but how you play the combination of Zach LaVine's future and DeMar DeRozan's future. And I don't think they're necessarily tied to each other. I think a lot of Bulls fans have held out this thought process that if they move Zach, they're absolutely keeping DeMar. If DeMar walks and they're not going to look to trade Zach LaVine, I don't think that those two are necessarily entrenched with each other as much as some Bulls fans think. I do think there's of course a degree to that, right? Because if you get a solid package back for Zach LaVine with younger players, it could make you look at it and say, hey, maybe this $25 million for DeMar isn't the value that we once thought that it would be, and we look at something else there. But I don't think they're necessarily, it's just we either move Zach or we either let DeMar walk, and one of the two are not necessarily going to be on the team, because there's still that nuclear option for Bulls fans that this team still does run it back yet again. And that is part of the problem as well, right? Is that we've seen the mediocrity with this. And I know, it's common. It's easy to think, well, you add Zach LaVine back. He's a 20-point-per-game scorer. We had Kobe White, who stepped up. He was averaging almost 20 points. The fact of the matter is that shot distribution is going to come down some, and the players are going to have to learn to play together. Kobe isn't the same player when he played with Zach before. And if you also keep DeMar on top of that, that still adds a lot of room for question. And Zach LaVine isn't just going to turn into just a catch and shoot shooter. You still got to run quite a bit of your offense for Zach LaVine if he does come back. So it's a balancing act that this front office has to make. And I think that Zach LaVine decision paired with whatever they make with DeMar and what they do with their first round draft pick could be very, very telling on how much and realistically we can get out of this mediocrity that we've been in so long as a franchise. And I don't have very much hopes for it. I'm not even going to front of you guys. I don't have very much hopes for this front office to make better decisions. I look at this as the series of events that led us to where we have in the ineptitude, right? And then you got also Lonzo Ball, someone back there with him making a return, and LaVar Ball saying that, well, the priority is to return to the Chicago Bulls unless he can go join LaMelo, and then that would override. Look, get his ass back on the court first. Can we get his ass back on the court before we worry about where he's going to play the year after? Yeah, it's the last year of his deal, but that next year deal may not be there for him for any team if Lonzo Ball doesn't come back and he can't stay healthy and he doesn't show a way to still impact wins. That's another question. So this Bulls team has a lot of these questions in the front office. But the thing is that I've said before, and I'm going to kind of bring it all back between this segment and the first segment. I no longer trust AK and Eversley. They don't have my trust anymore. They just don't. You got to show us something. And you didn't. You said last season at the end of the year, right, going into free agency, I think Bulls fans are going to be surprised with what we do in free agency. You did basically nothing, right? So you don't get you don't get credit for doing something. You don't get optimism for doing something. You got to show Bulls fans. And guess what? If you do show Bulls fans and you do build a team that wins consistently, right, that is no longer in mediocrity, everybody's going to be back in and supporting this team in the front office. And we're still supporting the team, but back in on the belief, right? But you have to show something tangible. And right now, the Chicago Bulls fighting for a 9th seed, basically the same thing that we did last year, is not really anything tangible. Outside of the development of Kobe, outside of the development of Iowa, it seems like you got a solid player in Julian Phillips. Dalen Terry starting to round himself out. All those things are true, but you need something more consistent and clear for Bulls fans to not look at this and still doubt everything that you do and how realistically, how serious you are about winning. And let's see if that comes along for the Chicago Bulls team, if that clarity comes. But we do have a game tonight against the New York Knicks. This either could be a massacre or it could be a fun game. The Knicks and the Bulls have a lot of similarities. The Knicks are right in the middle of a pack offensive team, averaging 112.5 points per game. They're 12th in the league in three-point attempts at 36 attempts per game. They hit that at the 17th best pace with 36.5% on 3 points that they can make, but they're 5th in rebounds. They get after it on the boards. So this is a team that offensively we've seen Bulls be able to defensively guard teams like this. It just comes down to how hot from three do the New York Knicks get. That's one of the biggest questions in there. Can the Bulls withstand however hot that the Knicks get offensively? Again, something that I've been saying more times than not here recently, the Bulls have to set the tone defensively first and foremost before they worry about anything else. You have to come in and try to set a tone defensively and match it, because the New York Knicks, while they're a middle of the pack offensive team, defensively, you can't deny what the Knicks are defensively. The Knicks are one of the best teams in the league defensively, period. The second best team per points allowed per game, only allowing 107.9, basically 108. When you pair that with how they rebound, the fact that Mitchell Robinson has been gone the majority of the season, so they can be even better defensively than what we've seen so far, the New York Knicks defense, especially with the stagnation and the lack of creativity on the offensive side of the ball for the Bulls, could be the doom for the Chicago Bulls today if they can't have a solid enough offense while also playing good enough defense. And like we've seen before, and like I've pointed out many times, the Bulls offense becomes better when their defense plays better and puts that offense in more favorable situations. That's what this team has to focus on doing. Set the tone defensively tonight first, and it's going to be hard. It's a Tom Thibodeau coach team, so you already know what they're going to have defensively. You know how they're going to play intensity defensively. And yeah, they're missing players as well. You can't deny that, right? The New York Knicks are missing some really key players for what they're doing. Julius Randle is now ruled out for the rest of the season, even though they haven't had him for a long part. OG Anunoby is not playing today either, more than likely. So those are two players. And again, having the OG Anunoby and Mitchell Robinson out there defensively would be really interesting to see if we can ever get that from them consistently. But so the Bulls have wrinkles into where they can work themselves into this game, but they have to play smart. They have to take care of the ball. They have to rebound poignantly. You have to make it a point to rebound the ball well against this New York Knicks team. And if you don't, you're going to be shit out of luck. Just be 100% frank and honest with you. You're going to be SOL. So the Bulls have to be locked in. And then on the offensive side of the ball, spread the ball around. Limit the turnovers, which the Bulls are generally good at doing anyway, but hit your open shots. Have another game where you're shooting the ball as a team close to 50% as possible while moving it around. And this is not a team that you can set in and not move without the ball, which the Bulls probably still will not move without the ball. That's just who this Bulls team is, unfortunately. But hopefully they understand the seriousness of the moment. This could be a fun game. And now that the Bulls do have locked in a play-in spot, I really hope they don't take their foot off the gas. They aren't going to drop out the play-in tournament. They can't drop no further than 10th anywhere. They're already the 9th seed, but you have a little bit of separation. The Hawks did lose last night, which gave the Bulls back a half-game lead over the Hawks for the 9th position. The destiny's in the Bulls' hands. They control this with how well they play and execute. And we've seen this team contend with anybody. They can play with anybody. The problem is they can lose on any night just as likely as they are to win. So the Bulls have to be locked in, and defensively, they got to. Jalen Brunson is a stud, bro. Like, you just can't deny Jalen Brunson at all. How Kobe White and on the perimeter as well, they handle him. Jalen Brunson's coming in averaging 27.9 points per game. You cannot at all fall off from that. You just can't. And don't sleep on Dante DiVincenzo having a big game for the New York Knicks as well, especially with his ability to spread the floor out. So you got to watch that. Now, we'll see. We'll see what the Bulls can do, man. I hope that they can play well. They also had Bogdanovich on that team, but he's been a player that hasn't really played too well for the Knicks since going there. So, that's something to look at, but he's another player that can absolutely fill it up against you if he is playing. He's averaging only 19 minutes a game for them. So, he may be on the outs there towards this offseason, but that's a story for another day. This Bulls team has to be locked in, and that's just what it comes down to. And pick and roll defense is going to be something we know. We've seen Tom Thibodeau offenses. They rely a lot heavily on their stars, and so if you can disrupt Jalen Brunson at the point of attack, it's going to be important. And we're looking at Kobe, Ayo, Caruso, who are all probably going to share that assignment in different ways. They all have to play solidly against this New York Knicks team, and we got to see if that Javonte Green impact is that real, right? Now that he's here for the rest of the season, hopefully he's playing in this game as well. He missed the last game due to personal reasons, but our defense is just so much better when Javonte is on the court in the small sample size that we've seen. So watching that over the last final 6 games to see if that maintains is going to be big and fun to watch as well. But let's hope that the Bulls can just take care of business tonight, guys. And you guys know I'll be live for the pregame, the halftime hangout, and the postgame shows, all live on the YouTube channel. If you're on the podcast side of things and listening, go and subscribe to the YouTube channel. There's some content that just doesn't come over to the podcast side, so you guys can get that as well. But yeah, that's it, man. Hopefully the Bulls can can maintain and they can play really well tonight. And I know that's a big hope coming from this team or having for this team with how they played on the course of the season. But let's hope that they stand up and they show that they're ready for the test tonight against the New York Knicks. Make sure you guys are following the show at Bull Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullcentralpod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, which goes down Saturdays and Sundays, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, thanks to you guys. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See red if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.